Hello learners, we are starting with our topic root systems, and you have already studied that root is the underground system of any plant and it develops from the radicle. And now we want to talk about what part of the seed makes the root. It is the radicle, as you know it by now, and when the seed germinates, the radicle is the first organ to come out of it and makes the root. So, we had studied about some taproot systems, and a quick revision was that you had studied 3 or 4 types of taproot systems. In that, we know about the primary root, which develops from radicle and its secondary and tertiary branches, and it performs the function of anchoring the plant and absorbing water. So, now a root takes another function, not only just the absorption of water and minerals from the root, from the soil, but also it takes up several other functions, and it modifies itself to help the plant in various other functions. So, we have seen in this chart, which you are seeing, is that taproot modifications, which are conical root, fusiform root, napiform, and tuberous root. This we have seen examples also, and now we shall be talking about second category in the table which you see, and that is adventitious root modifications: tuberous root, fasciculated root, nodulose root, moniliform root, annulated roots, assimilatory roots, epiphytic roots, pneumatophores or the respiratory roots, and sucking roots, prop roots, stilt roots, climbing roots, and clinging roots, and floating roots. Why so many types of adventitious roots I am mentioning? It is because all those different functions which roots take up, according to that their name has been given. Tuberous root by itself says that it is the modification of root which actually starts accumulating starch or other food form for the tiding over the unfavorable time. So, it gets thick and tuberous, and example we have shown you is of shakarkandi, which you call commonly, and next is fasciculated, and then one very popular is nodulose root. In that you have been eating gram and leguminaceae members, in which the roots develop small nodules, small bulb like structures in the root. In that there are certain bacteria which fix the nitrogen, and these nodules provide the nitrogen nutrient to the plant. So, then likewise many other roots are there, and each and every type of this root has its own special function, and this we will study in detail later. I did tell you about certain respiratory or pneumatophores roots, where in the marshy lands plant is submerged in water. The roots are submerged in water and aerial portion is above. But now since roots can't breathe, so certain portions of the root, they come out and stand like fingers above the water level, and they breathe oxygen for the root to function. Roots also need oxygen. So, this is how they become breathing, or the respiratory roots or the pneumatophores. Sucking roots, you must have heard about cascota, which is basically a angiosperm, but it depends on other plants for its nutrition. So, they develop small sucking roots or some small growths from the stem, which goes inside the host plant, and they connect with the xylem and phloem of that plant and draw nutrition for itself. So, this is called sucking root. or the haustoria. And then there are prop roots. At 10th point, you are seeing prop roots, and you must have seen huge trees of banyan, जिसे हम हिंदी में बरगद बोलते हैं. So the banyan trees generally they grow very gigantic and they become too huge, and then the plant and the branches they become heavy and they need support. So certain branches, certain roots they develop from the stem branches and they go deep into the soil and they develop a pillar kind of strength for the plant to support its huge body. So then are the stilt roots. Stilt roots are like side branches coming out of the lower part of the stem, and they provide extra support to the plant to stand erect. All right. So it is just like you must have seen some ropes being pulled to erect some shamiana. So these stilt roots are like that, and they are helping the plant in developing balance. So then there are climbing roots, because suppose if the stem of the plant is weak and it cannot stand on its own, then it will not get sufficient sunlight to do photosynthesis. Now need of the plant is to take support of some plant or wall around them, and the roots basically they help the plant in climbing up on that support. So these are called climbing roots. Then there are clinging roots. Similarly, small roots which cling to various objects around them, and they provide strength and they help the plant to basically get exposed to the sunlight so that it is able to survive. And last is floating roots. Floating roots are the ones for the aquatic plants, plants which stay in pond or slow flowing streams, etc. And the plant must not go below the water level. So there are certain parts of the roots which develop like floaters, and they fill up with air and they help the plant to remain on the surface of the water. So this is how various modifications of the root actually help the plant to survive. Then next is how do we basically see the adventitious root modifications. So we have already talked about tuberous, fasciculated, nodulose, moniliform and annulated roots, and in this table you are seeing their examples as well. So tuberous root is as in sweet potato, and fasciculated root as in dahlia, and nodulous root as in mango and ginger, moniliform roots as in grasses, and annulated root as in ipecac. And you can see certain pictures now where adventitious root modifications have been shown. So these are the examples ABC of tuberous roots, fasciculated roots and nodulous roots, right. So let's move ahead and let's see some more pictures of some other roots. This is the moniliform root, which is figure D, and annulated root, which is in ipecac, and assimilatory root or the epiphytic roots as found in some orchids. So modification for the better gaseous exchange, we have already talked about pneumatophores, and in the mangrove plant where they perform the function of respiration. So rhizophora again is the plant example for such roots. Then let's see another picture. In this picture, what you see, I have circled red with some portion of the plant where you see small projections coming out of the stem. These are the haustoria. Haustoria perform the function of sucking nutrition from the host plant. And these hostoria are present in cuscuta and certain varieties of ipomia, and also in money plant, commonly known as money plant. So then these are another few pictures. First, A is the picture of pneumatophores, which are the respiratory or the breathing roots. Then next is cuscuta, which is plant surviving on other plants for its nutrition. Then let's move on. This is the prop root. We were talking about bargad tree, and this is how the roots that support the plant and maintain its balance. So this is the banyan tree, which you know commonly. And then stilt root were present in sugarcane. I told you about this, that certain roots from the sides of the plant in the aerial portion, they develop and they provide extra support to the plant, because generally you see that the sugarcane is a very tall kind of plant and it needs extra anchorage. So strong anchorage is provided by these roots, all right. So these are the climbing roots, and they generally develop in the weak stems where the plant needs extra support to climb on any of the supports available. So next is the clinging roots, and then modification for buoyancy and respiration. We have already talked about floating roots of Juicia, and also there is one very common plant, Ishornia, which has very beautiful flowers of purple color, light pink color, and beautiful flowers. They come on the shining leaves, and the bulbs which get filled up with the air actually provide the plant help to float on the surface of water. So this Ishornia I was talking about is a big problem for our environment, because they grow very fast and they exhaust all the oxygen available in the water, and then the fish and the other aquatic animals cannot survive because there is very less oxygen left for them. So this is how Ishornia is creating some problem in the environment right now. So let's talk about certain other functions of a root. It gives anchorage, it supports the plant firmly in the ground, so this is the mechanical function. Then absorption of water and minerals, and then special functions. We talked about that certain modifications of the root, they perform special physiological functions like food storage, assimilation, absorption, atmospheric moisture, sucking food from the host, better gaseous exchange, and mechanical functions like buoyancy, balancing the plant on the water surface, and stronger anchorage and climbing. So I hope by now you are quite clear about the various functions roots perform. Now let's talk about what is the inner structure of these roots, what kind of tissues make a root. So we will talk about dicot roots and the monocot roots, and we'll try to understand the difference between two types of roots. So generally what we do is we take a root and we try to cut it transversely and take a very thin slice of the tissue and try to see it under microscope. So when we see it under the microscope, then a lot of structures are visible, and we can see all the tissue that composes the transverse section, section and how the structure of the root is formed. So what we get to see under the microscope, I'll explain it layer by layer, moving from outside to the inside. All right. So, imagine the way you cut certain salads transversely. For example, some onions which you cut transversely. So, the structures are visible under the microscope are, let's say, a dicot root of gram. The outermost layer is epiblema. It is the single outermost layer and thin walled cells, and some cells are prolonged to form unicellular root hairs, and it protects and absorbs water. Then next layer is called cortex. It is a large zone, means multi-layered, too many layers, and these are thin walled cells. They are parenchymatous tissue. They have lot of intercellular space, and it can store food and water for the root. Next, now you can see in this figure, if you are able to see point 1, which is written as root hair. Root hair emerge from epiblema, the outermost layer, and these root hairs are generally single celled. They increase the absorption area of the root. Then after the epiblema, you are seeing that number 3, cortex, which has multi layers of thin walled cells, and between the cells there is lot of intercellular space, and the main function I told you already is the storage of food and helping in conduction of water and minerals. So now after the cortex there is layer number 4, which is called endodermis. Can you locate on the diagram? Yes, it is number 4, endodermis. Endodermis is basically a layer which cuts off the cortex from the vascular tissue inside, and this endodermis has generally certain special cells which have Casparian strips. Casparian strips are the thickenings on the wall, so that there is no wastage of water flowing from outside to inside or inside to outside, and this is how they give a direction to the flow of water inside the root. And the cells which are the endodermis cells which are in front of xylem, they have thin walls. They are special cells. They are called as passage cells. They create some kind of passage for the movement of liquid from cortex to the vascular tissue. So inside the endodermis layer is the layer called pericycle, and inner side of pericycle has lot of connective tissue or the conjunctiva tissue, and pith is in the center. Now the main conduct of water will happen through the tissue called xylem and phloem. So xylem is responsible for movement of water and phloem is responsible for movement of food items or the nutrients. So this is how these two tissues, xylem and phloem, they perform the function of movement of water and food material, which is in the form of starch or glucose, which is synthesized in the green part of the plant, but the movement has to happen through all the plant body up to the roots. So now we have to understand that what kind of these tissue are, xylem and phloem, what kind of tissue they are. So can you see the label in the diagram? Xylem is 8 and 9. Look at this, 8 and 9. You see this difference in the size of the cells? Yes, yeah, large cells which are looking large, number 9, are called metaxylem. It is the older xylem which has large lumen, and protoxylem which is comparatively new and smaller cells, and then there is phloem, patches of phloem in between the xylem tissue. So then this phloem is responsible for the movement of starch and sugars. All right, so let's move on to vascular bundles. What happens generally, xylem and phloem, the patches, they lie on alternate radii. Suppose there is a circular structure of the root which is in the microscope, you are seeing it, and you can imagine one radius from the center to the periphery, there is one line. So, now xylem and phloem, they lie in patches on different radii, and the vascular bundles are radial and the xylem is exarch, where protoxylem, the first form, the smaller cells, they have narrow vessels, and tracheids, they lie towards the periphery, and the metaxylem differentiates later and it has wider vessels and tracheids, and they lie towards the center. So, depending on the number of xylem patches, a root can have 2 patches, so they are called diarch. When they have 3, 4, 5 and up to 6 patches, accordingly they are called triarch, tetrarch, pentarch and hexarch. So, up to 6 patches of xylem can be seen in a root. So, now let us look at the monocot root. You remember we have 2 categories of plants, one is monocot, one is dicot. Dicot example is gram, and monocot plant example is maca or the corns. So, these two belong to 2 different categories, hence their root structures are also quite different. So, let us study about the monocot root. Monocot root, when we cut it transversely and try to see the structure inside the root, then it shows the following structures in the figure. Now, you can see in the figure there are unicellular hair just like the dicot root, epiblema, and then cortex, just same to as similar to the dicot, but the phloem and xylem, they have different positions. Here you are seeing that metaxylem is towards the center, protoxylem is towards outside, and there are in between there are certain patches of phloem. Number 4 which you see is the phloem, 5 is the Casparian strip, it is the thickened part of the endodermis whereby the flow of liquid is channelized or given direction, and number 6 you are seeing is the metaxylem, and 7 is the center or the pith where the storage of food can happen. Then number 8 is the endodermis, and number 9 you are seeing is the protoxylem, and number 10 is the pericycle. So, this is how different monocot and dicot roots, they differ from each other. Then now we will talk about, let us differentiate dicot and monocot roots. So, you can see in this table that the number of vascular bundles, if you see on the top of the table, dicot roots, they can have 2 to 6 kind of vascular bundles, but monocot root has many bundles. So, this condition is called polyarch. So, if we have 2 bundles, they are diarch. If there are so many bundles, they are called polyarch. So, dicot root is di to 6 hexarch, but monocot root has many of the vascular bundles. So, it is called polyarch. Now, pericycle, the seat of origin of lateral roots, or the vascular and the cork cambium. So, and seat of origin of lateral roots only. So, this is how pericycle has 2 functions in dicots, but only single function in monocots. So, we will study about it later. So, in detail, cambium is present in dicots, but it is absent in monocots. Secondary growth is generally present in dicots, but it is absent in monocots. Pith is very small or absent in case of dicot roots, but it is large in case of monocot roots. So, let us move on. The origin of lateral roots is endogenous, that is, it is from a deeper layers, and the seat of origin is pericycle, where the cells opposite the protoxylem, they divide and they form a hump in the endodermis. Can you see this figure? Look at this figure. So, in this very first figure, you see that there are pink and blue, two layers I have denoted with different color. Now, they start dividing, and in figure 3, you can see that from 2, now 4 layers have been formed, and slowly one hump starts appearing. And in the last figure, if you have seen that the meristem gets organized and a lateral root starts developing from the deeper layer of the cells. This is how this hump penetrates into the cortex and emerges as a lateral branch of the root. All right. So, this is how lateral roots develop. So, secondary growth, see, when the plants are young and they are herbaceous, you can really turn them, they are so soft, so they do not have any woody structure in them, and they are soft when they are young. But second year, third year, you get to feel that plant has become stronger, now you can't turn them. Why this happens? It happens because of the secondary growth in the dicot roots. So, roots grow in length with the help of apical meristem, it is called primary growth, and apart from the primary growth, the root grows in width, and in width when they grow, it is increase in the girth. So, this increase is called secondary growth, and how it happens is that secondary growth is supported when the pericycle cells we had shown you in the figure, the pericycle cells outside the protoxylem, they divide and they form a strip of cambium. Cambium means the cells having ability to divide, they are meristematic. So, now these cells they divide and they cut cells from on outside and inside, and the vascular cambium appears in the conjunctive tissue on the inner side of the phloem bundle. So, we must understand that plant in the beginning is green and young, but after some time it becomes woody and strong. So, how it happens? It happens with the help of secondary growth happening in the root and the stem. So, how the process starts? Let us see this figure. In figure 1, you are seeing that the vascular bundles they join, and this yellow colored line is actually the cambium cell which has a cell division potential in it, and it starts cutting tissue, xylem and phloem on the both sides. So, in the second figure that you are seeing an advanced stage, and in the last figure what you are seeing is that xylem has cut secondary xylem and secondary phloem. So, secondary xylem and secondary phloem, they have lot of xylem tracheids and vessels, and they are stronger. They make the actual wood, the wood portion which you see in the trees, in the stem, in the roots. So, that hard woody portion develops due to secondary growth in the plants. So, students, now you have learnt about root, its modification, its functions and its secondary growth. I hope by now you have understood the concept of structure and also the functions that a root performs. Thank you so much, learners.